Hello, we are in our math lesson today, lesson 27, session 2, and I am beginning on page 561. We are continuing to compare decimals, yet today we're going to compare decimals in the hundredths. And our word problem here states Dora lives 35 hundredths of a mile from school, and Katrina lives 53 hundredths of a mile from school. Who lives the greater distance from school? So we know that we're comparing equal parts here because each of these is of a mile, and a mile has a standard measurement of distance. So these are equal parts, if you will, of a mile. And we have the number 35 hundredths and 53 hundredths. And the question actually wants us to know who lives the greater distance away from the school. So we can model this equation in ways that we've been practicing. We could use a hundredths grid, but I think that's going to be really complicated for me to draw. So I'm going to go ahead and write out the hundredths decimal place value chart as we've been doing. Oops, I don't know why I wrote tenths, and then hundredths. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and fill in this chart with our two numbers. So we have 35 hundredths of a mile, and we have 53 hundredths of a mile. Now, just like in yesterday's lesson, or the previous lesson rather, we always look to the tenths column to compare numbers first. And in the tenths column, I have a 3 and a 5. And I know that the number 5 is greater than the number 3, which is what I'm comparing in these two columns. So I already know that this second number, 53 hundredths, is greater. But I can also look at the number as a whole, and I have the number 35 and the number 53. So when I look at the number 35 and the number 53, I know that 53 is also greater. So when I'm comparing these two, these two decimals, which I have 35 hundredths and 53 hundredths, I know that 53 hundredths is greater than 35 hundredths. So to answer the question, who lives a greater distance from school, Katrina actually lives the greater distance from school, and that would be the answer to that problem right there. So we're going to move on from page 561 to 563. And this is going to go over what I just explained in a little more detail. And number 1 says, look at the models on the previous page and write a fraction equivalent to 35 hundredths. So remember, that is just simply the number 35 over 100. And then we're going to look at this next one. 53 hundredths would be 55 over 100. And then number 2 says, which fraction is greater? And explain how you know. Well, when we are looking at these two fractions next to one another, because they have the same denominator, we simply need to look at the numerator to see which one is larger, and we can see that the 53 is larger than the 35. And then number 3 here says, write a greater than, less than, or equal sign in the circle to make this statement true. And we've already said that the 53 hundredths is greater than the 35 hundredths, or the way this is actually read, it is 35 hundredths is less than 53 hundredths. So who lives the greater distance from school? And we answered that as Katrina. This other question says, do the model and place value chart support your answer? So the models that we used and the place value chart both support our answers. And I would just put yes. It does say to explain, and you can simply say that, well, we kind of already put it in there. So I think yes, it's okay for this one right here. And then number 4 says, explain how you can use fractions to compare two decimals when both are in hundredths. And I kind of explained it already up there, but we can say if they're both decimals are in the hundredths, you know the greater numerator is the larger fraction. And then this would be for you to answer on your own. It says, look back at the try it and other strategies by classmates and the model it's. Which model or strategies do you like best for comparing two decimals when both are in the hundredths? For me, I think I really like it on the place value chart. So I like the place value chart. And then I also like the fraction method too, comparing fractions, simply because I know if both the denominators are the same, then I just have to look at the greater number in the numerator. All right, so this concludes session 2's actual instruction for today. So you are going to be able to do page 564 and 565 on your own.